how do we respond to moving into the future? So we've looked at the past, looked a bit at, well, Sadhananda gave her beautiful talk on the learning from the past and bringing it into the present. And then I'm offering some reflections on what the future might hold and how we might keep Taraloka thriving and our community thriving and ourselves as individual practitioners thriving. And it's said, Bhante said in one of his lectures, I really love this, he said if you took all the words and all the Buddhist texts, there's probably trillions, billions of words, and you boil them down to one word, that word will be impermanence. Very, very good. So the absolute central teaching of the Buddha is that everything changes. So, in a way, I can have a few thoughts about the future, but we really have no idea what the future is going to contain. Really, we can make some guesses, which I'm going to do, but maybe the best thing any of us can do is just learn to live gracefully with change. And that's what the world is going to require of us. Because it's also, the Buddha also makes it very clear that one of the primary drivers for our suffering, for our dukkha, is we don't live in harmony with the way things are. So we rigidify around experience, and we push away things that we don't like, and we pull things that we do like towards us, and thus we suffer. We go round and round the wheel of suffering. So learning to live with change it's a real sort of central skill as a Buddhist, perhaps the central skill as a Buddhist. And if we look around at the world, we can see that it's changing, always has and always will. But it's interesting, maybe, and this is all speculative in a way, but maybe in the West we are heading into a period of more instability. That seems entirely possible, but then, if you look at the 20th century, by this point in the 20th century there had been a world war, and very soon there was going to be a Great Depression. So it's not like it was wonderful then and not so good now. It's always been a mixed bag if you look at history. But it does seem like maybe we are heading into a period where there's a breakdown of some of the stability that many of us have experienced in the West, the sort of post-World War II stability. And of course that means that might be we have more anxiety, we have more fear that we're having to deal with, most of which is based on speculation and anticipating something that may or may not ever happen. But nonetheless, if we are feeling a bit of unsettledness, then you're not alone, because objectively, times are difficult. It's interesting because I have run a business for 25 years now, and I can definitely sort of see a pre-2008 trajectory and a post-2008 trajectory. Pre-2008, we felt, well, looking back, the relatively affluent. Of course, probably didn't really think it at the time, but running a business, you could apply for a grant and you probably get it. And that is not the case now at all. So we had the global financial crisis, we sort of vaguely got over that, and then we had Brexit here in the UK, which was another big blow, and then we've had a global pandemic, very big period of uncertainty, and now we've had war in Europe, and we've got a new resident of the big house in America. So, it's I can see some people nodding who also run businesses when I talk about pre-2008, post-2008. It does feel quite a different world, and everything feels harder. I mean, certainly running a business, it has got significantly harder. But nonetheless, if I think about my life, I'm 65 years old, I have had a life of immense privilege compared to the historic average. I've lived in a country which has never known war on its land while I've been alive. I mean, historically that's highly unusual. I know there's been wars in the world, but I've never known war on my land. I didn't really come face to face with much death until my 50s. I mean, that's so unusual. in any society. I've had quite a lot of deaths since then, and death's become much more part of my life, which I'm kind of relieved about in a funny kind of way, because I used to think all the deaths in my life were stacked up just over the horizon, and one day they were going to crash upon me, and how would I cope? I didn't know, in a way, how I was going to respond to death, because I hadn't been tested. And I have now, and it's become part of the rhythm of life, which I sort of feel moved by. And as a woman, I've had incredible opportunities compared with my mother. I often reflect on that. My mother couldn't get a mortgage, my mother couldn't have a bank account, and my mother couldn't have a career to do with her circumstance. Very, very bright woman, exceptionally bright woman who was very frustrated most of her life. I've been able to have all those things, and I've been able to have a career, I've been able to get a mortgage, I've been able to have a bank account in my own name. I mean, that's within my lifetime. There's been that change. I've had access to contraception. And my mother, I remember her saying many years later that I've got a twin sister, and then our other siblings were older. And she said she didn't really know how to talk to us about sex, because we were the first of her children who'd had access to contraception. So we were talking to her about boys and sleeping with boys when we were 16 and stuff. We were quite open. And she didn't really know, it wasn't her roadmap. So amazing. So I've had a life of incredible choice that my mother didn't have that possibility. And I often reflect that historically, it's very, very rare to be able to follow the religion of your choice in any society. Very, very rare. So I can be a Buddhist in a nominally Christian country. I mean, that is really worth considering. And it's very, very rare to have the freedom to practice any religion as a woman. Very, very rare. Especially a woman who's got access to contraception and can make choices about how I live. Very, very rare to be like us. You know, we're all women, whole diverse range of lifestyles, situations. Some of us have got families, some of us haven't, some of us got careers, some of us haven't. And we can all come away together and practice within this tradition which welcomes us in our diversity. That's very unusual, you know, that we're all welcome and we can all go for refuge as intensively as we can possibly manage, and everything is valued and everything is supported. So I like to think that probably most of the conditions that each and every one of us in this room has, from a historical point of view, is a luxury rather than a given. It's kind of worth thinking about, isn't it? Because we often don't see our lives like that. You know, we have the evolutionary psychologists talk about the negativity bias, where we're quite naturally oriented towards what's wrong with our lives. We sort of grumble about our lack of opportunities or this or that. But, you know, we are so fortunate. Every single person in this room is incredibly fortunate. And we've all acted on that, which is also very moving, isn't it? We're all here. We could have stayed at home and lay on the sofa and watch the telly or whatever. But we've made the effort to come here and we've created this amazing event together. And I was very struck by Sudden Lundy's comment the other day about how this radio program she heard about menstruation, how historically even menstruating is a kind of privilege. Doesn't feel like that, of course. But that, you know, either you're pregnant, you're breastfeeding, or you're malnourished. So amazing. So please, don't take any of it for granted. Don't take any of it for granted. We don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know if these conditions will exist in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. The thing we do know is that everything will have changed. We know that. So Taraloka won't be exactly the same as it is now. The people who come here won't be exactly the same as we are. But we are the springboard for the future. So the intensity of our engagement and our involvement is planting seeds right now for the future. And the women of the future may not have these remarkable conditions that we have. In fact, I think it's probably possible they won't. I don't know. But if you look at history, we're in this kind of little bubble of privilege, relatively speaking. So it seems plausible that it might not be so good for people of the future. So we need to really cook this thing up now so that there'll be something here for people. And, as we've been saying repeatedly, but I'm going to say it again, the existence of Taraloka is absolutely incredible. We have Bante, who was, I have had it said, nagging the women of the early 80s to get their own place so that this can happen. In fact, I have heard it said that one woman got so sick of it that when he was saying it yet again, she sat and turned her back to him. Is that correct? Wasn't Parami? No. But he had that vision, that prescience of how amazing it would be for women to have the sense of power and to create that in a place for ourselves. And my memory, and I think this is true, that when I lived here in the early 90s, Taraloka was the only place in the world, only Buddhist retreat centre in the world, built by women for women. And it's possibly, do you know if it's still the case? You don't know. I know Ayakema had one for a little while.
But was it just for women?
I think so,
Okay.
yeah. And as a little aside, me and Parami went to a big sort of inter-Buddhist conference in the States in 2015, and I hadn't really had much contact with Buddhists from outside Triratna, and that was very, very interesting. There were a lot of Theravada nuns and Tibetan nuns and so on, and that's where I really saw, oh my God, we have the most incredible freedom, and we have the most incredible opportunities in our tradition. Compared with a lot of more traditional Buddhist traditions. So that was very exciting for me. And again, made me think, oh my God, I really have to make the most of this. And it can be a pressure, can't it, when someone says make the most of this precious opportunity. But I think that's good. I think it's good to feel a bit, I said to someone before, this might be a bit bracing this afternoon. And I think good. If we're feeling a bit like, oh my God, that sounds like hard work, well, I'm afraid it is kind of hard work. And it's really, really important for you and for the world that we do sort of step into our power. Maybe that's my main message from this afternoon, is exhorting ourselves to step into our power, because we all have amazing power within us. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about what can we do individually and collectively to safeguard what we've got in an unpredictable, changing world, because that's the task. The world is unpredictable, incredibly unpredictable, definitely changing. What can we do right now to safeguard what we have for our own future lives, but much more importantly for people who aren't even here yet? Well, that's not more important. Our own future lives is also very, very important. But so that this thing rolls on and is always here as a sacred place for female practitioners. So individually, I'm going to draw on the Karaniya Metta Sutta, which I really love. I've done quite a lot of study and led some retreats on this text over the last couple of years. And it's based on the threefold way, which is a very traditional Buddhist map of ethics. So we purify ourselves ethically, and out of that we can work on our minds with a clear conscience. And out of that arises insight and ability to see life accurately and live in harmony with the true nature of things. So the teaching is you can't really do that if you've got a conscience which is all murky. So the first thing we do is we create conditions where we can lead a good life and have a clear conscience. And it's very, very beautiful in the Karaniya Metta Sutta, where it says, if you know what is truly good for you, and understand the possibility of reaching a state of perfect peace, then this is how you need to live. Start as a capable person who is upright, really upright, gently spoken, flexible and not conceited. Then become contented and happy, with few worries and an uncomplicated life. Make sure your sense experience is calm and controlled, be duly respectful, and avoid doing anything unworthy that wiser people would criticize. And what's very beautiful here is it says, if you know what is truly good for you and understand the possibility of reaching a state of perfect peace. It's really good that. So reaching a state of perfect peace is enlightenment, complete liberation, awakening. And this idea, if you know what is truly good for you. Well, what's truly good for you is reaching the state of complete liberation. Yeah, it's not necessarily, having a nice car or a nice job or whatever. It might be those things as well. But the overarching thing is the thing that's the very best for you is liberating your mind, liberating your heart. So I love that, this idea of good, what's good for you. So we're all here presumably because we've got some kind of intuition that the teaching of the Buddha is the ultimate good. And if we can really align ourselves with that, then all kinds of other goodness will follow. So then there's this idea about being capable. I love this. I quite often say to myself, are you capable? Are you being capable? And really it's just kind of being a capable person. Just being a good, capable person. Look after yourself and take responsibility for your life. Be confident and make things happen. It's so good. We've all got that within us. Yeah, it's like basic good functioning. Try and function well in your life. Be a capable person, and we can all do that. We can all do it perhaps more than we think we can. And this idea of looking after yourself, take responsibility for your life. This is a lot of the things that Sadhanandi was saying this morning, that for her, what I was hearing is living all these years in community has been helping to build capability. And make things happen. Isn't that brilliant when you have that sense that you're feeling into your power in your life and you think, yes, I can make things happen, within my sphere of influence. I don't have to just put up with what I might not like. I can actually do something about it. So capable. And then upright. Literally means straight, sort of upright. Not kind of, bent. Upright. You'll turn up when you say you're going to turn up. You'll be reliable. You'll remember what you've said you'll do, which is increasingly difficult for me with my aging brain. You'll write notes reminding you of the things that you'll say you're going to do. You'll be reliable. Yeah? Reliabilities, these are such wonderful qualities. You'll be truthful. And all these things require a degree of integration, togetherness. You'll be a kind of together person. And self-knowledge, which again is all the sort of things that Sadhanandi was talking about today. You'll be of noble speech and gently spoken. I can really work on that. Every time I go to New Zealand, which is where I said I was from there the other day, in New Zealand, cursing is just like an adjective. So every time I go to New Zealand, I come back a little bit more foul-mouthed. And I have to sort of rein myself back in, remember where I am. Move to Scotland, then I'd feel right at home, apparently, according to Parami. And be gentle, which doesn't mean weak. This is something we can get muddled up about, I think, that being gentle is sort of soft and wishy-washy. But gentleness can be very, very powerful because we're not hard-edged. We're flexible. We don't need to push at things, and that can be the greatest strength. And I think particularly around thinking, we don't need to be rigid in our thinking. And that's a very advanced life skill. Not to be rigid in your thinking, but that's such a great thing to reflect on, when you're really wanting to get your own way, just to step back a little bit and think, okay, what's going on here? Does it really matter? Most of the time when I wanted to get my own way, when I step back, I realise, Vidyamala, it's really inconsequential and it really doesn't matter. Just let it go. And then sometimes we do need to step in and assert ourselves. So that's also a skill to work out that boundary. But I think you don't have to have your own way. That will be a great thing for our community to imagine if we had all these flexible, upright, capable people turning up on time, taking responsibility, truly believing we can bring about the change we want to see, gentle, skillful speech, not asserting ourselves in a kind of inappropriate way, not going wishy-washy in an inappropriate way. How amazing that will be. We've got a lot of that already, so I'm celebrating what we already have. But the lovely thing about this part of the Karaniya Metta Sutta is these are all very down-to-earth human qualities. You know, the Buddha's not saying you have to be completely amazing in order to move towards awakening. He's just saying you have to just work on your basic human integration, your basic human kindness, and be a good person. A decent, healthy, friendly, straightforward person. And this is something that Bhante really emphasized in his teachings about being a happy, healthy human being. Yeah. One of the things I think that Bhante's really given us is this bridge between the highest teachings of Buddhism, you know, not having a fixed and independent self, resting in shunyata, all these kind of things, which can seem really, really attractive, but then we can sort of go for that when we haven't done the basic work that we need to do. But Bhante's really, really good on, you know, you have to have a really good sense of individuality. As Sadhanandi was saying, you have to have a functioning self before you can really creatively let go of some of your hard edges or some of your self. So he's got this lovely teaching on becoming a happy, healthy human being, which I've always really, really, really loved. And that means that when you do start to get more insight, it's very integrated into your life as you're living it. It's not like you're flipping out and having some big experience and then you're crash landing back into a life that's a bit chaotic or you don't know how to integrate it. We just have to follow this, what he called it, the path of regular steps. You just do the work, you show up day after day, you work on your mind, you work on your heart, you do your physical exercise, you become a reliable person, you have your little glimpses, you integrate them, you assimilate, and very, very gradually, tremendous, tremendous transformation can come about. And I've seen that in many of my friends, many, many of my friends. It's very inspiring. And it's more inspiring than people having big experiences and then sort of crash landing and then having big experiences and crash landing, and it's all a bit more jarring. So this idea that we're just steadily doing the work, moving forward, becoming more whole, becoming more loving, becoming more bountiful, is very, very beautiful. And we've definitely got that happening collectively in Triratna, and we've got it happening collectively at Taraloka, and we've had it collectively over this weekend. People look different this weekend. We're doing the work this weekend, and hopefully what you're discovering is it's not really work, is it? It's play. It's enjoyable. I think we need to have the courage of our convictions as individuals. Yeah. And of course, we're having the courage of your convictions while remaining gentle is very interesting. Very, very interesting practice. And I think one of the most important qualities that we need to have as individuals is a sense of humour. It's not often talked about, but I think it's absolutely essential to the spiritual life, because as you turn your gaze inwards and you see all your habits, it can be very demanding, can't it? Not particularly attractive, and it can be even a bit depressing. But if you just hold it lightly and think, guess what, I'm just human. Everyone's got their version of this. I'm not a particularly bad person or a particularly screwed up person. I've just got my little soup going on over here. We're all in the same boat. We're all doing our best. Have a little chuckle. Tomorrow's another day. Yeah, I find that really, really important. And I often say this these days, that one of the very unexpected fruits of practice in my own life is holding life lightly, which I did not expect. You know, when I started out decades ago, I thought I'd become more earnest, very composed, serious, maintaining a noble silence most of the time. You know, nothing could be further from the truth, and I feel so happy that the fruit is enjoying life. One of the fruits is an ability to enjoy life more, but also to just hold the whole catastrophe more lightly, because it is, I often say to people, it's hard being human. It really is hard being human, but we can learn to hold it lightly in this bigger field of play. And this is the lovely image in the Mahayana of the play of the Bodhisattva. It's like a big elephant just splashing from pond to pond. And we can experience life more like that. And something I like to do in my own practice is have slogans. So every now and then I'll come up with a new slogan, which is a kind of saying that I can remind myself of in my life. So they're very practical. And during the pandemic, I was thinking, gosh, this is a big thing we're all living through. And potentially very, very overwhelming. So my slogan was, take life seriously, hold it lightly. Which was really, really good. It really helped me, because it was a very, very serious situation. It was, and I didn't want, you don't want to trivialize a global pandemic with enormous suffering. But I kind of knew the practice was to be able to embrace the seriousness of it, but also hold it with perspective and some degree of lightness, because overwhelm wasn't going to help anybody. So that was a very interesting practice. So those are some of the things I think we can do individually. In a way, take responsibility for our own minds, take responsibility for our own hearts, our speech, and also be a capable, upright, decent, straightforward human being. And I think the more we do that, we are creating conditions for Taraloka to continue, because we'll be turning up as those kind of people, and then newer people will see us and think, oh gosh, well, a bit like my first retreat, where I met those people who were comfortable in their own skins, actually very good humoured, lots of laughter, and I thought, I want to be like that when I grow up. And that's why I'm here, because I've been attempting to follow in their footsteps ever since then. So there'll be people that come along who meet you guys and think, oh, I want to be like them. So that's also how it works, I think. So then collectively, how can we maintain what we have, the conditions, create conditions for the future? Well, one thing I thought was we can cooperate and share our talents. And again, we've really got an experience of that this weekend. We've got all these people doing different things. We've got the cooks, we've got people cleaning, we've got the team here doing all kinds of amazing things. We've got volunteers. We've got people who are good at driving cars to get those of us who are less able over to the marquee. We've got lots of people helping out other people in all kinds of ways. We've got the shrine builders. Yeah, so we have that sense of that. And just a kind of comment of what I've observed over my life is, I think sometimes women, we can undermine each other a little bit. I don't exactly know what goes on, but sometimes we can, we can really celebrate each other, but we can also sometimes be a little bit, I don't know, mean, I suppose. I sometimes call it girls in the playground, like the way sometimes kids are in the playground. So I think that's something to guard against. And if you notice that little kind of critical, comparative, maybe jealous voice or whatever it is, to really take responsibility for that and think, I don't need to do that. These people are all amazing. So celebrate each other's strengths. I think that's a tremendous quality, because we need that. We cannot do this on our own. Yeah, life is hard. Having a human mind is really hard. There's a wonderful psychologist called Paul Gilbert, who's done a lot of work around compassion training. And he talks about how we've got very tricky brains to do with our evolution. We're very evolved to respond to threat, because we're quite vulnerable compared to big, like elephants and tigers and lions. We're very vulnerable creatures. So we've got these brains that are very, very quick to spot threat. And when he gives talks, he goes, "It's chaotic in there," which, is kind of reassuring. And you think, oh yeah, it is kind of chaotic in there. So we absolutely need each other's support, and we need each other's encouragement. And picking up on what Sadhanandi was saying about the plant metaphor, this comes from the White Lotus Sutra, a really wonderful Mahayana text. I think it's the parable of the rain cloud, that the Dharma is like a rain cloud, and it just falls equally on all the different plants, and then they grow in their own unique ways. And it's wonderful what you said. Can you say what Bante said again? Can you remember? We grow more like plants than people realise. That's so good. And Sona, who I live with, he's always going on about the plants. You know, be your own plant. It's so good. And, you know, that's quite hard because we've also got very comparative minds, I think. I mean, I've got a very comparative mind because I'm a twin. It's very interesting when you're a twin, every single thing in your life is comparative. And it's painful. You're always better than or worse than. So that's something I've really tried to work on. But I think, you know, we are quite comparative as humans. So be your own plant and let other people be their own plants. You might not you might like their plant, might be prickly. You might not understand their plant, but it doesn't matter. They're being their plant and you be your plant. And the talk that Parami mentioned where Bante was in a marquee, was it? It might have been here or further down. I remember the walk being less far, but that might be a favourable memory. Yeah, it could have been I was 20 years younger or whatever. Anyway, it was somewhere here, and he gave this talk. It was really remarkable because he couldn't really read at all then, so he did it all completely from memory. He just stood up and talked. But one of the things that he said I found very moving is in a way, he was expressing his confidence in the tradition, but he was saying he meets lots and lots of people. And he particularly talked about the people who you never see in public. He meets lots of people, the sort of unsung heroes of our tradition, and he had a lot of confidence in people's practice. I can't remember how he talked about it, but you know, he met lots of people. They're not the leaders, they're not the well-known practitioners, and they're really getting on with it. You know, he had a lot of confidence in everyone's practice. I was very struck by that. It's very, very interesting, all these different plants. Something that I've also been thinking about a lot in my own life is the importance of honouring stages of life in ourselves and in one another. So I'm now in my mid-60s and it feels like it's so different from my mid-50s, apart from the declining cognitive function. There's also, I'm moving into being a crone. I want to be a crone. I really, really want to be this old hag that's not really got anything to do. You know, I don't really want to be doing anymore. I don't want to be accumulating. I've done a lot of accumulating in my life of sort of knowledge and wanting to accumulate. I can't bear it anymore. There's almost a revulsion towards accumulation. I didn't feel like that 10 years ago, and in 10 years' time that might, you know, I'm in a big letting go phase now, it feels like. So I think the young ones need to honour that in the older ones, and the older ones we need to honour. When you're young, it's different, and really encourage, you know, the excitement of youth and the hunger of youth. So I think that's the other thing that's happening with our tradition. I'm just noticing it more and more the last few years as we are truly becoming intergenerational, kind of more than ever before, I would say. So you come to a gathering like this and there are people of all ages. You know, in the early years everyone was young, and then for a while everyone was grey-haired. And then there's been a lot of work done around the young Buddhist movement, and now we have these gatherings and we have the whole range. Isn't that brilliant? Because that's what we should have. I think that's what a healthy society needs, proper intergenerational wisdom sharing and energy sharing and so on. So I think we also need to watch out for threats and seize opportunities. And both those things are, I think, very, very important, both, you know, here at Taraloka and in our wider tradition. So Bante gave a very important talk in 1999 called Looking Ahead a Little Way, which is when he was just beginning to hand on the responsibility for our tradition to the first generation of disciples, of students. And he talked about two kinds of opposition and challenge that we were going to face. One was from the outside world and the other was from within our community. It's very kind of seminal, important talk. So he talked about particular things then. That was obviously 20 years ago. So I've been thinking, what are the threats now from the outside world? So there's things like climate change leading to mass migration and wars. That seems kind of baked in, I would think. I don't think that's particularly speculative. I think that will probably happen. So that's going to be unsettling in all kinds of ways. I mean, just climate change thing, tiny one. When I lived here, there were no mosquitoes and no midges. Isn't that amazing? You know, that was 25 years ago, or maybe 1990, 35 years ago. I keep looking at the accountant. And now, you know, there's mosquitoes and midges. So that's an ecosystem change just within that period of time. Wars, breakdown of the Western Alliance, that seems possible. Financial collapse, that seems possible. You know, we have this endless growth model within Western capitalism that if you look at what the Buddha taught, nothing goes up forever. So that could happen quite soon. It might happen miles away. But all empires rise and fall. All structures rise and fall. So that could happen. There's always the pull of the group, you know, wanting to fit in, wanting to be like other people, wanting to be liked and all that kind of thing. And sometimes in insecure times that can get more stronger. You know, we get insecure, so then we go for the sort of lowest common denominator of fitting in. So we have to watch for that, I think. There's materialism and consumerism. And unfortunately, you know, they're kind of completely fused with endless growth. So, you know, if we want our way of life to continue, we have to keep shopping and we have to keep destroying the planet. So that's all very complicated and probably will fall apart at some point. And then it's just basic things like greed in all its forms and aversion in all its forms, and they're all based on ignorance in all its forms. So those things will be possibly coming down the line, and I would say it's forward stroke probable. Yeah, without, you know, who knows. But one thing Bhante said in his talk, he said, you will have to stand alone, risk unpopularity, even persecution to stand up for your Buddhist ideals. You will have to struggle and you will have to work very hard. That's quite intense, isn't it? But with the way things are going in the world, there are, well, I think Sadhananda mentioned this the other day, you know, there are people within our Buddhist tradition who can't be public about being a Buddhist because they'll be persecuted in their country. That could happen in the UK. You know, it could. Who knows? So do you have the courage of your convictions to stand up and say, well, I'm a Buddhist, this is what I really believe, come what may? You know, that's a big ask. And then we've got the internal challenge, which is disharmony. And Bhante was saying that was a bigger threat to our community than any external challenge. That's, again, very interesting, and that will be based on, you know, his experience of witnessing our movement trying to get established. Because we're very new, very, very new. I've only been around since the late 60s. So he was saying we need to be able to deal with disagreements. And I mean, that's kind of basic, but really hard. So then we need to be able to go back to being, you know, a capable, upright, decent person who knows themselves and is able to deal with conflict in a sort of realistic and intelligent way and maintain the greater goal and our shared values. Yeah. So that's the things that might threaten us. And then I also think we just have to have our antennae really up for any opportunity. Because I think there's opportunities all the time for the Dharma to get more established and for things to get even better. But often we're a bit sort of, you know, we've got our blinkers on and we don't spot these opportunities when they arise. And so we need to be very adaptable and flexible and open-minded. And that can be a remarkably hard thing to do because we have our, well, this is how we should do it. Yeah. I was really impressed actually in the team meeting the other day. We were talking about something. I can't even remember what it was. And Maitri Devi, you know, he's got a very deep, rich way of doing things, very in harmony with the land. And I might have said something about, where does this fit with a particular way of doing things in our tradition? And you said, well, I don't really care. In a very non-reactive way. I was so impressed. It was like, wow, that's like, because it's so obvious what you're doing is so good and so ethical and so aligned with our vision. So it's just, just a tiny little thing. It was very, very, and complete lack of opposition. It was like total confidence of sort of self-belief in your plant. That's what it was. Self-belief in your plant, which is at home amongst the actual plants. And Bhante said somewhere, I think he said it more than once, that he could not have founded our tradition 10 years earlier or 10 years later. That the conditions were just ripe at the end of the 60s for a new Buddhist tradition. And he spotted that. And he seized that opportunity. And that's why we're here now. That's amazing, isn't it? And I founded Breathworks around 2000, which is this big mindfulness charity. I feel I've said the same thing. I couldn't have done it 10 years earlier, and I couldn't have done it 10 years later. 10 years earlier, the world wasn't really ready for meditation. And 10 years later, someone else would have done it. So that's very interesting, isn't it? And again, it kind of arose out of a coming together of my internal wish to give something to the world, and the world being at the sweet spot where it could take hold. Which has given me a lot of confidence in this idea of spotting when the conditions are right for something amazing to happen. And there's a lovely quote from Shakespeare, from Julius Caesar. There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea we are now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves or lose our ventures. Magnificent, isn't it? I'll read that again. There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea we are now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or lose our ventures. Yeah. I think that's a very good description of both the founding of Triratna, but also we are on a full sea right now. This weekend we are. And we must take the current when it serves, which means yes, a big yes to what we've got, or we will lose our ventures. So I can think of a couple of ways that Taraloka has done this the last few years. So we had the global pandemic, and Taraloka went online, like many, many other places. And you might think, well, that's an obvious thing to do, but actually it's not. It's the sort of thing that one could easily have opposed and thought, we don't do it that way. You can't teach the Dharma online. I could imagine thinking that myself not very long ago, in a slightly rigid way. Taraloka, like many of our centres, no one had the skills. You're rushing around trying to figure out cameras and microphones, and they've also got the added complexity of Wi-Fi here. That is no mean feat to get all the Wi-Fi working. So Taraloka did that, and out of that's come a particular retreat that I now lead every year, apart from this year, called Compassionate Warrior Training, which is a retreat for women of asked for ordination, based on early Buddhist and later Buddhist approaches to mind training. And last year, Mahamani was doing the program, and I said, well, shall I come and do it in person? And she said, no, we want to keep it online. Just so excited about, because there are people who can't get on retreat for family reasons, caring reasons, health reasons. So we're dedicated to, well, I hope we are, I am, to offering this every year, beaming out into the world. So that's like, that was taking the current when it serves, or we will lose our ventures. So there's now the opportunity for women who can't get to Taraloka to access this particular online offering. That's a tiny example, but I think it's actually quite a good example that there'll be lots of other things that come down the line that the people who live here, the custodians, it's like, seize it. I mean, who knows what AI is going to do? I haven't put AI as a threat or an opportunity because we don't know yet. But, it might be that offers amazing. We might, have hologram sort of amazing kind of three-dimensional online shrines. That'd be pretty incredible. We might be able to sort of have a Buddha here teaching all AI. I mean, who knows? But I'm very open-minded about AI. It could be incredible. It could be catastrophic. Who knows? But it's coming. That's all we know, is that it's coming. So I think we have to embrace the things that are coming rather than going, oh, it's not very Buddhist. It's here. Make it work. Like, embrace it and manipulate it to your own ends. Why not? Everyone else is going to do it. In fact, I saw a thing in a magazine the other day, and someone's thinking of doing an AI Buddhist canon, which could be incredible. You better pull everything that's ever been said anywhere by anyone and somehow structure it into, a Buddhist canon. And then you ask for an executive summary, I would imagine. Yeah, but the main thing is that I think Taraloka will need to adapt and change over time to remain relevant, as we all will. Without losing integrity, that's another dance. Don't just go for the latest fashion. Keep the heart, but then the methods can be quite flexible, I think, as long as you keep the heart true. And then Bhante also said in this talk, looking ahead a little way, that Triratna only has a future to the extent that we've got people with genuine insight, people who have genuinely freed their minds and their hearts. So that includes Taraloka, and it includes all of us. And he calls it a non-egoistic stream of spiritual energy. So we can only describe it as a non-egoistic stream of spiritual energy and perhaps even consciousness that has begun to take over. I remember being at that talk, and I found that so thrilling. I mean, again, very intimidating. But really, he's saying it can't just be a kind of holiday camp, having a nice weekend and nice food and nice people. That's all really good, but it has to be moving towards liberation, where we're no longer locked in our little hard, I'm a lump over here and you're all lumps over there, and we're completely separate and we're banging into each other. We have to break free of that whole paradigm and realize that there's just an arising and passing, arising and passing. We're all particular. Another beautiful expression he had is that we're all coagulations of the common stream of life, which I think is exceptionally accurate. I've really, over the years, I've tried to come up with a better word than coagulation because it's so unaesthetic. But I think it's profoundly accurate. So we have our habits and we sort of cling and we push away and we rigidify, and we can do that really a lot, and then it's like a scab, really crusty. We can do a little bit and it's just like a little bit of sort of clotted milk. Or we can do it not at all and it's just flowing. And the great thing about that image is, scabs can dissolve, clots can dissolve. They're not there forever. I know it's very unaesthetic, but I think it is really, really accurate. So you can look around the room and we can see each other as these little separate lumps, or we can see just sort of energy. We're just kind of coagulations of energy, and we're continually flowing and changing. We're continually influencing each other. Like every single one of us is going to go home different because we've been here. Right now, in this very moment, there's stuff going on and we're all changing. Little glances, little movements. I'm noticing people maybe fidgeting and I'm thinking I've been talking too long. Must wrap it up. Maybe my voice gets a little bit strange. You pick that up, you get a bit anxious. You think, oh God, yeah, it's going on a bit long. And we get this kind of wave. I now think, come on, just relax. Wrapping up soon. I relax a bit, my voice changes, you think, oh yeah, she's a bit more relaxed, I can relax. That is actually what's happening all the time. All the time we're co-creating our experience of life. And we can do that with awareness, or we can do it in a habitual, unhelpful way. That's kind of the deal. So Bhante goes on to say, the future of the order, he was talking to order members, but he's meaning all of us, the future of the order, the future of the movement is in your hands. It was really intense to be sitting in the audience. Do you remember that, Param? Do you remember it, Southern Andy? It's like, that, you know, the invitation, don't stop halfway, apply yourself to this wonderful, wonderful vision of awakening, liberation, pure heart. Live with flow. Let go of all your hard edges. Make this living, breathing, mysterious world glorious. Do it together, and then everything will be fine. But if you don't do it, it's not going to be so good. So it was like, oh my God. Yeah. So I think for me, I love the image of portal. And, you know, our teachers are like portals to a different way of being. So a portal, I sort of see it quite literally in a certain kind of way. There's a sort of, like everything feels sort of dark and hard-edged, and then there's an opening and light comes in and everything gets illuminated and we see it differently. So for me, you know, my teachers are like portals to another way of being. And I think places are portals, very, very strongly. Places are sort of energy. I was going to say an energy hole, that's completely the wrong word. But, you know, it's where the thickness is less dense. And Taraloka is definitely a portal. And in the Celtic tradition, you have thin places, this idea of thin places. And I think thin places get created. So Adhisthana, for me, is becoming more and more of a thin place all the time. And it's only been there for, you know, as a Buddhist place for just over 10 years. And before that, it was a school for very, very autistic children. So there would have been a lot of love there, but also a lot of sort of suffering and difficulty. But it's a bit like, and when I go there, it's like, oh my God, I get kind of, it's almost like the energy hits me. And when I come to Taraloka, the same. So we are keeping the portal open. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. By coming here together, practicing together, we're doing the work. We're keeping the portal open. Tara's here. All the beings are here. The light is here. And just a couple of quotes about thin places. Those rare locales where the distance between heaven and earth collapses. Isn't that brilliant? Those rare locales where the distance between heaven and earth collapses. So this is like that. They've been called the places in the world where the walls are weak. Places in the world where the walls are weak. A lot of W's in that sentence. Where another dimension seems nearer than usual. And I mean, I've been feeling that very strongly this weekend. Places where thought falls away and a luminous quality remains. Yeah. Places where thought falls away and a luminous quality remains. Places of energy, a place where the veil between this world and the eternal world is thin. A thin place is where one can walk in two worlds. It's beautiful, isn't it? And I certainly have had an experience of that this weekend. And like Taraloka feels very alive with other creatures, which will be to do with the current custodians and your love of the spirits, all the nature spirits and so on. Yesterday when I was over there, there was a rustling noise. And I thought someone's moving a lot and they're not actually sitting there. That's weird. You know, like it was beside me, there's no one there. And I looked and the floor was kind of doing this. So there was some little creature sort of just roaming around underneath the flooring. I felt such love for it. I thought, what a gorgeous little creature. I wanted to know what it was, of course, that was my literal mind. But I think I felt such love for it because this whole place is feeling so welcoming to all the creatures. Yeah. So maybe that's the last thing I want to say is I think our primary task is to keep the portal open for the future generations. That's our primary task. And we do that by practicing together. We do that by coming here together. And if we think about, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, 100 years, that might just seem a long way away. But the people who are here in 100 years' time, they're just living in their present moment. And we're living in our present moment. And that time in 100 years' time will just be the next moment that rolls along. And if all the beings and all those, 100 years, they're all present, keeping the portal open, kind, capable, upright, decent, then just quite naturally, this kind of thread is kept alive. So it's not like we have now and then we have then. We just have now. And then is just a whole other now. Yeah, the only moment really is now. The past is a memory, the future is just an idea. And there's a gorgeous quote from Desmond Tutu where he says, change comes about through millions of tiny acts. And this is how apartheid was overcome. So every single one of us, every time we choose the skillful over the unskillful, the kind over the harsh, we show up on retreat rather than stay at home. Every time we do that, we're keeping the conditions flowing. I think it can be that simple. And trusting that if we keep doing that, we will also liberate our minds and our hearts and rest in this great non-egoic stream of spiritual energy. And the portal will be wide open for all the beings of the future. So, yeah. I'll leave it there. Yeah.